Progressives are calling out another way that Americans are getting saddled with medical debt. So now, in a letter to the chief executives of Wells Fargo and Synchrony Financial, who are the large issuers of medical credit cards. So think about this, right? Medical credit cards basically are for people who can't afford to get health care. They may need like a major surgery or they may need treatment for something. And so here these companies come in, say, well, don't worry, we can finance you. But there's, of course, always a catch. And that catch is pointed out in this letter that was sent by and signed by Senators Elizabeth Warren, Ed Markey, Bernie Sanders, Chris Murphy, and Sherrod Brown. They expressed concern that given the circumstances in which these cards are used, medical credit cards could be predatory to patients seeking medical care and leaving patients stuck paying higher costs with incredibly high interest debt. They write that the concern here is the current structure of our healthcare system, which is for profit, which is incredibly broken, often requires that patients enter into medical debt in order to access services that they need. Within that context, patients often under duress because, somebody comes out and tells you, hey, you've got, cancer and you need chemo, you need treatment, or you need an operation. If you don't have money, if you don't have good insurance, or even if you do have insurance but can't afford, your deductible or your copay, you're screwed. And then you're going to have to take out this debt. And of course, Wall Street jumps in and says, don't worry, we've got you know, these care cards for you. So you can just, load yourself up with this very high interest debt, but at least maybe you'll be able to survive. It's horrifying. It's incredibly dystopian. So now the letter continues by saying they're pushed into these and then locked into medical credit cards despite the availability of alternative payment options that might be more beneficial and offer lower interest rates. But I would argue, of course, that medical debt shouldn't exist. And that's also the position of Senator Bernie Sanders. But again, let me take a moment here to just, think about how messed up this is. We live in the wealthiest country in the world. And yet people have to get credit cards with incredibly high interest rates so that they can live, so they can get needed health care. It's not like, oh, I want to get a TV. Looks like I can't afford it. I guess I get a credit card. Or my washing machine broke, and I need to get a credit card from ABC Warehouse. Yeah, I'm literally telling on myself here, and to go and finance a new washing machine. It's not that. It's literally your life. Dystopian as hell. The letter continues. Medical credit cards often come with high interest rates following the so-called no interest periods that banks deceptively use to lure in customers who are desperate to pay for costly medical treatments. Again, taking advantage of people at their lowest and at their most concerned, their most basically where they don't really have the option of saying no. And they're, stressed out. There's a lot of anxiety. It's incredibly predatory. Now in 2013, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, this is from Common Dreams, ordered Care Credit, Synchrony's financial medical credit business, to refund up to $34.1 million into consumers who were victims of deceptive credit card enrollment tactics. Last month, the CFPB hit Wells Fargo, which offers a medical credit card named Health Advantage, with $3.7 billion in penalties for a slew of abuses, and called the institution one of the most problematic repeat offenders of the banks and credit unions. Wells Fargo, Wells Fargo stopped being a piece of shit challenge 2023, and they have already failed. And they have a history of being just an absolute garbage company that continuously screws over their customers. And yet, and yet, every time they get hit with a penalty, it's nothing because the incentives are in the wrong place. The incentives here are, look, we're gonna fuck around. We're gonna screw people out of all this money. We're gonna get a ton of money, and then just have to pay a tiny fraction of it in penalties. With no other enforcement, no other penalties other than a little bit of financial, which we already have factored into our profit margins. We're just going to continue to do what we're doing. And that's it. And keep getting rich. These are the companies that we have to deal with. Apparently, if we have the gall to get sick and don't have insurance or don't have money to pay for our god-awful for-profit healthcare system. And the reason this exists is because of this god-awful, unaffordable healthcare system. A lot of people can't afford afford insurance or good insurance, or even if they have insurance, can't afford to use the insurance. Crane's Chicago Business recently reported that as healthcare costs and insurance deductibles have risen, more hospitals in Chicago and around the country are teaming up with the banks to market these medical credit cards and other loans to patients who lack insurance or funds to pay for the care. Now, you're not going to be surprised that the hospitals get something in return for offering these credit cards. Hospitals that convince patients to take medical credit cards get paid up front by the banks at a time when unpaid bills are straining their budgets. So, and you know where the unpaid bills come from, right? It comes from people who can't afford to get insurance. They can't afford to pay for their premiums. They can't afford their deductibles, and they get sick. Because what are you supposed to do when you get sick? You can't control that. And then, well, hospitals are left, holding the bag, essentially. And so they've decided, we're either going to charge insurance companies more, who then pass it down to people who have insurance, which raises rates for everyone else, or we're going to team up with the banks in order to screw people over. I mean, it's, again, disastrous. Now, the newspaper continued by saying lenders, for their part, see an opportunity to capitalize on the growing gap between the cost of medical care and what many Americans can afford. So, again, understand that. We hear the word capitalize all the time. Taking advantage of, making a profit off of people who cannot afford to get medical care. Disgusting. Patients who take the card, get the money to pay for the care, solving a short-term problem. But a quick decision made in a high-stress situation can create long-term financial problems. Patients who can't drum up the cash to pay off the initial balance within an introductory period end up with a hefty credit card debt that carries some of the highest interest rates in the industry. Predatory, deeply predatory, incredibly messed up. And the worst part, of course, is we could fix it. Other countries don't have this issue. But because we have a for-profit healthcare system, we have capitalism in our healthcare, we do nothing. As more than 100 million people are getting saddled with over $200 billion in medical debt. Debt for just being alive, for getting sick, for having, medical issues. By the way, poverty is expensive. You have a small issue, you can't afford to go to the doctor for like a suspicious bump, right? If so to say, right? That's an example. There could be a million different examples. A weird rash, something. You can't afford to go to the doctor for that. Oh, it's small. It'll go away. I can't afford it. Then that grows. Or it becomes, since you didn't have it looked at, it just could be a cancer, be some other issue that gets worse over time because it's unchecked and even more expensive. And it could have even been something that was very simple to treat in the beginning, but much more expensive to treat later on. And that's what happens all over this country, where you have people that have to forego medical care because you can't afford it. And it grows into something that's even more inexpensive and life-threatening, so that they're forced to do this, and they still don't have the money, so they go to these credit cards, which are even more exploitative and predatory. It's just a vicious, vicious cycle. As I said before, poverty is the most expensive thing. And that hurts the economy as well. I mean, look at that $200 billion in medical debt. That could have actually been going into other things like homes, cars, stimulating the economy, local business. Instead, these people are paying banks for making a decision to stay alive. It's disgusting. One example of this, by the way, that was highlighted by Kaiser Health News was Cheyenne Dantona. Now, Dantona, 31, was diagnosed with blood cancer while in college. Now, lucky for her, the cancer was eventually treated and went into remission. But when Dantona changed health plans, because she had health insurance, she was hit with thousands of dollars in medical bills because one of her primary providers under the new plan was out of her network. Ooh, sorry, out of network. We're not covering it. Network. So, of course, she had to do what she had to do, right? She took out a medical credit card because all these unexpected bills slammed her. And, of course, she ends up getting stuck, paying even more in interest. And while she's doing that, her other bills start to not get paid. They go into collections. When that goes into collections, her credit score tanks. She's unable to get anything else. She's not able to get loans for houses or homes, cars, or anything. And then, well, what happened to Dantona? Well, she put all of her future plans on hold and was forced to move back in with her mother in Minneapolis, or outside Minneapolis. She has no future anymore. She just has a mountain of debt for something that, again, could happen to anyone. Anyone. But while she suffers and has no future, is robbed of her future, shareholders made money. They made an extra buck. It's disgusting. And by the way, one of those things about this card, speaking of credit scores, right? One of the surprise or disturbing features of these cards is the fact that they basically set the limit of that card to exactly the precise amount that you need for whatever, treatment you're going in to get. So now you might not think about that and think that's relevant. Why is it? Well, when you're looking at credit reporting agencies, that's a maxed out card. Maxed out cards do not look good. They have a massive impact on your credit score. Now, the cards, the letter points out, may also adversely impact consumers' credit reports because of the way that they are treated by credit reporting agencies. The agencies recently agreed to remove 70% of medical debt from credit reports, but these changes will not benefit medical credit card holders, because their debt is considered credit card debt and as such is viewed less favorably by the bureaus. And since the amount of credit is given, again, is the same as a service, your credit score is just tanked. It's done. Banks have identified medical credit cards as a lucrative opportunity to profit off the worsening crisis. Patients were unable to afford their medical care. The lawmakers continued, demanding that the bank executives provided information about their medical credit card businesses such as how many accounts are in collections and how many healthcare providers they have partnered with. So now, getting that information, yeah, okay, that's good. So you can definitely make a case against it. But at the same time, we already know how predatory this is. We know how bad this is. We already have a fix for it. And that is, number one, eliminate all medical debt. And number two, enact a single-payer healthcare system. That's it. Medicare for all. That's the solution. It's always been the solution. It's always been the obvious solution. Every other country in the world has done this. Or I should say pretty much every other modern industrial country has done this. Has done some form of single-payer healthcare. You go to those countries, people are not going into massive credit card debt over medical bills. Just for getting sick. Or they happen to have bad luck and get into an accident. Or, well, in America at least, because we have a very unique American problem of mass shootings. If you're a victim of a mass shooting, you're going to get stuck with a medical bill for the rest of your life, on top of having to go through a mass shooting. Now, of course, the reason that we haven't fixed this problem is pretty obvious. It's greed. Politicians get bribed by special corporate interests, insurance companies, hospital groups, Wall Street, with these banks, and their options are pay up or die. It's a sick system that can only be dismantled if we end the broken campaign finance system. These laws that allow these politicians to be bribed by special interests. I think the big focus needs to be, going forward, get all the corporate money out. Get it all out of politics. Get corporate money, get health insurance money. Democrats are gigantic, by the way, recipient of health insurance company money. But they bought everyone. If you think Republicans are also going to solve the problem, no, their solutions actually make the problem, so-called solutions make the problems worse. They just work for different donors, actually don't care if Americans die. So it's a system that really is legalized bribery, and it affects every single facet of this story. And by the way, many other laws in this country. So we have to get this money out of our political system. And in the case of healthcare, our lives literally depend on it.